A majority of commercial organizations know that sales discovery is a critical part of the sales cycle. They know that weak discovery creates problem later in the deal. But when it comes to improving discovery, many teams still default to the same answers. Run a workshop, share a question bank, remind reps to ask better questions, maybe review a few calls. You could argue that none of that is wrong, yet the problem is that it rarely creates a consistent operating standard around discovery. Some reps may improve with that approach, some might revert back to the old habits, and manager coach in different ways. CRM notes stay inaccurate or too thin, and then the team still has no shared definition of what good discovery actually looks like, which is the biggest problem. That's where I want to focus on in this specific video, because I believe discovery is a key sales capability that has to do with many of the problems a company faces during the sales cycle from a commercial perspective. So what I'll be talking about in this video is based on the sales discovery training guide and blueprint I put together, which gets much deeper into the full program design, the discovery code structure, the Kirkpatrick model you can use to actually measure whether things are working with your discovery training, the concepts of return on expectation, the 5 stages of sales mastery, and how AI role play can support practice at scale. So I'll link the full guide and the supporting assets in the description below. For this video though, I want to focus less on the theory and more on how I'll actually apply it inside a real organization. Certainly, the point is not to create more discovery content. The point is to help reps prepare better, ask stronger questions, especially open and probing questions, quantify pain more clearly, involve the right stakeholders earlier, and leave the call with the next step that actually means something. At the center of the approach are 3 simple ideas. The first idea is that discovery training should be tied to business outcomes, not vague learning goals. The second idea is that discovery should be broken down into clear behaviors that manager can observe and reps ultimately can practice. Third, training needs to move through a full behavior change path. Learn, remember, practice, apply, and master. That's why the one pager you will find among the various assets also frames the program through planning, execution, and value demonstration, with a discovery call structure built around framing, discovery dialogue, which is the core of the conversation, and closing for next step. So let's start with where I will begin. I would say that the first mistake I will avoid is starting with the training content. When teams decide they need discovery training, the immediate instinct is usually to build a curriculum. What should we teach? Which methodology should we use? What questions should reps ask? But I'll take a step back before discussing training or even behaviors in any ways. I will start with the output. In other words, what should a good discovery process produce? Depending on your sales motion, that could be, for example, high quality discovery notes, a completed qualification record, a stakeholder map, an opportunity brief, a business case, a mutual action plan, especially the earliest part of it, a clear recommendation on whether the opportunity should progress. The exact artifact matters less than the principles. If discovery is working, there should be evidence of it, and you need to define that pretty clearly. For example, if a rep completes discovery across several meetings, should they be able to clarify and articulate, for example, the customer current situation, decide future state, quantify business impact, success criteria, decision process, key stakeholders, and potential risk, and finally agree next steps? If the answer is yes, then that becomes the standard. So those questions I'm listing are basically the criteria of the output that you should be able to evaluate and observe. Once the output is clear, identify the required behaviors becomes much easier. You can work backwards and start asking, what will a rep need to do during discovery, if it's a meeting or multiple meetings, to consistently produce these output at their required standard? That might mean, for example, setting a clear agenda and upfront contract, asking layered, open and probing questions, validating understanding before pitching or presenting anything, identifying additional stakeholders, quantifying pain and business impact, confirming next step and mutual commitments. This is also where return on expectation, ROE concept comes into play. Rather than saying we want to improve discovery skills, define what improved discovery should produce for the business, and agree that with all the different stakeholders so that you can define the return on expectation contract, or what we're going to be able to see done more consistently once the program is rolled out and is actually being performed and reinforced over time. For example, over the next 12 weeks, Improve discovery quality for the mid-market AE team by increasing quantified pain capture, improving discovery to opportunity conversion, strengthening early multi-threading, and improving discovery scorecard performance. That creates like a much clearer boundaries for the program and what it's aiming to do at different levels. So the training then becomes a means to an end. You're not teaching discovery for the sake of teaching discovery and providing like great techniques and that people are going to forget after a few weeks. You're helping reps consistently produce the outputs that lead to better opportunities, stronger pipeline quality, and more predictable deal progression. Once the output and behaviors are clear, then I'll use the discovery call structure as the design spine. In simple terms, you can boil down all discovery call to framing upfront contract, the main discovery dialogue, and then revisiting the upfront contract and closing for next steps. With this, then you can keep the program anchored to the real conversations reps need to run and the evidence those conversations should produce. Again, this particular structure is something that is provided in the guide that you can also review in your own time. So the smallest useful output I will create from all of this is a one-page discovery call execution standard. We don't start again from the full training program. We're not creating a certification path for a large curriculum. We're starting from one page that defines what good discovery looks like for your team. And I will continue to repeat this because that's the step that most organizations fail at in terms of not defining those standards. This is useful because it gives reps and manager a shared reference point very quickly. And even if you have like limited time, limited buy-in, and imperfect systems. And in this one page, I will include 4 things. The first is the call structure. You want to keep it very simple. You want to say, for example, open and frame the call, agree the agenda and upfront contract, explore the buyer's current state and decide future state pain, the potential impact of that pain, and then look at aspects related to decision process and additional stakeholders that may need to be involved. Share relevant value snippets where appropriate, recap what you heard, and then confirm next steps. That's in bullet points, a typical structure that you could portray and convey. Second, list the critical behaviors. This needs to be observable, not vague things like run better discovery or be more consultative. For example, the rep sets the agenda and confirms the buy priority. The reps asks open question before narrowing with probing and closed question. The reps avoid pitching before understanding the buyer situation. The reps links pain to business impact. The reps confirm decision criteria and stakeholder involvement. The rep summarizes the buyer situation in the buyer's own language, very important. And the rep agrees a clear next step with an owner, action, and timing. That's something that is much easier to coach, as you probably can notice. Third, add a lightweight scorecard based on all these things. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but simple like 1 to 5 rubric is enough to start. And you might score the call framing, the depth of the questioning, active listening, pain and impact discovery, value relevance, how good is the recap, and the next steps, for example. So the important part is that the same scorecard is used across both practice and live calls. If reps practice with one star, but managers then inspect with another, like the system obviously breaks because there is no connected chain. So keep that in mind. The fourth thing to include is defining one reinforcement action. For example, each manager reviews one discovery call per rep per week for 4 weeks and score it against the same rubric. That's how you start to make that behavior stick, going from like simple enablement content and training into an actual operating rhythm for the team. A small pilot could look like this. So the behavior focus is questioning depth and next step clarity. The team is the mid-market AE team. The time frame is 4 weeks. Each rep completes one AI role play or peer role play, let's say, per week. Each manager reviews one live discovery call per rep per week. And the early measures are scorecard average, quantified pain capture that is actually visible in notes, and opportunity with explicit next steps. Is basic, but already moves things in a more operational way rather than being just stuck at the moment of simple discovery training or content. And it gives you a foundation you can expand later. Once the standard is working, you can then add a fuller curriculum. You can maybe integrate as well AI role play scenarios. You can have manager clinics. You can also have like certification levels of different competency for discovery, and you have better measurement system around all of this, because I think discovery deserves that type of treatment given how important it is as a capability and stage of the sales cycle as well. Let's now talk about some of the things that tend to get in the way. The first thing I would say is when discovery training is treated as a workshop. A workshop can certainly help it can create awareness, it can introduce a few interesting ideas and frameworks, it can give reps a common language actually around discovery. But a workshop will never change behavior on its own. Discovery is a skill, and skills need repetition, feedback, and continuous reinforcement. That's also why I like to think in terms of the 5 stages of sales mastery model from Mike Kunkel, which is learn, remember, practice, apply, and master. And it reminds us that knowing something is not the same as doing it, and doing it once in a training environment is not the same as applying it consistently in live customer conversation. Another typical issue that I see when it comes to discovery training and implementing that to make it stick is overloading the curriculum. So discovery is so broad that it's very easy to add too much. Like there is a lot of sub-competencies under discovery. You might have then a module on personas, a module on qualification, a module on how to ask better questions, a module on how to resolve concerns, a module on how to build a business case off the back of the discovery call, and so forth. All of this may be important and impactful, but if everything is scoped, like nothing is ultimately the priority, and people will lose the focus on the most important things. So for the first version, I would rather improve 2 behaviors that matter than expose reps to not 10 concepts, but just a few of them that they would be able to apply. Then the third issue is, as always, like weak manager involvement, and probably one of the biggest one. Like discovery quality improves when manager inspect discovery consistently. If managers do not review codes, whether they're doing them more manually or with the help of the AI, using scorecards, and they don't reinforce like the same standard and coach against the specific behaviors that have been defined, reps will treat the program as another enablement activity that doesn't have full relevance to what they are trying to do and the goal they are trying to achieve. So before launching anything, I'll always ask, what exactly will manager do after the first initial training? Will they run call clinics? Will they review 1 call per rep each week? Will they use the same scorecard? What they will expect specifically? So if the answer is unclear, you already know that the program is unlikely to change behavior. The fourth issue is also measuring the wrong things. Things like attendance, completion, and satisfaction are easy to track for sure, but they do not tell you whether discovery actually improved anything. First, whether it improved as a capability itself, but then whether it's actually having an impact on the sales cycle. So for discovery, better signal includes like talk to listen ratio, opens versus closed question ratio, quantified pain captured, stakeholder identification early on in the process, documented next steps. Then you start to look at things like discovery to opportunity conversion, business case quality, and movement in the actual improvement over time as a trend for your conversational intelligence scorecard. Then to these leading indicators, you can then add more lagging indicators that can be connected to those. You want to try and create a chain of evidence across different levels so that you can tell a great story and narrative of contribution, not necessarily causation, because there is so many things that affect the sales cycle, but certainly being in a position to tell a story about how different action you took have then led to changes in behavior and output, which then have led to certain business outcomes. The fifth issue that I want to call out is a poor transfer from practice to live calls. This is something that is not that easy to get right. A rep might perform well in a role play and you'll be able to show that, but still revert to old habits in a live buyer conversation. So that's why, as I said before, the practice scorecard and the live call scorecard should be exactly aligned. If you use AI role play, peer role play, or manager simulation, the behavior rubric should carry into live call reviews. And you want one standard across the full path. Practice, apply, and improve. The final issue that I call out is that the surrounding system often stays unchanged. What I mean by that is that, for example, enablement trains rep to ask better discovery questions, but the CRM does not require things like pain, impact, stakeholders, or next step to be captured, which is the things that you'll be able to observe whether the reps have been able to elicit that information. So it's very important that the system as well support what you're trying to do. And then if you have a situation where managers or ops do not inspect those fields, or call reviews are not scheduled, the question bank sits in a folder nobody opens, within a few weeks, you know that the new behavior you're trying to instill would just not occur over and over again to become a habit. So this means that the real work is not only teaching discovery, but making meta discovery easier to perform, easier to inspect, and harder to ignore. Now, let's talk about adapting your discovery training to different environments. So if you are in a low maturity environment where you don't have a lot of resources, there is not yet like a full commercial system developed, and maybe you don't have a lot of like sales training that is done, you start small and just focus again on outputs and behavior. Start with one discovery call template, one scorecard, one manager clinic, and one specific behavioral focus within the call itself. What is the most important thing, the one or two, that the reps will have to get right on that call? For example, for the next month, you might only focus on better upfront contract and cleaner next steps. That's it. That's a good starting point, and it's going to be much easier to reinforce, and probably is going to increase like drastically the quality of your conversation. I always recommend as well focusing on that 20% that provides you the 80% of the results. If you are in a more moderate maturity environment, I'll turn that into a short sprint. You might have the idea of a 4-week model that I also described in my blueprint. So week 0 is preparation. So you load the scorecard, you choose the call examples, you align CRM fields, you brief the manager and you agree things with them, and you clarify what the team is going to inspect. The week 1 is learn and remember. So teach a discovery structure, validate understanding, and reinforce the key concept through short checks or teachbacks. Week 2 is practice. Use AI role plays, peer role plays, or manager-led simulation, depending on what kind of tools you have at your disposal. Week 3 is apply. Reps use the behaviors in live calls, and manager review those calls with the same scorecard that has been defined for the practice. Week 4 is early certification or progress review. You check what has improved, what needs more reinforcement, and what the next cycle, the next, let's say, 4 weeks, should focus on. If you are in a more mature environment, you can connect discovery training to a broad performance system. For example, you could have things that are a bit more elaborated, like AI role play by persona and scenario. You have more conversational intelligence scorecard already embedded in your tool that are scoring automatically. The usual manager call clinics, various certification levels across different competency of discovery, CRM syncs and having the CRMs with the right fields, and then quarterly outputs and behavioral reporting that they can be inspected and discussed to understand how we are improving discovery and what that is leading to in terms of the business outcome. There is a warning here, though, that I want to highlight. The risk is always that you can overcomplicate this and you can create too many scorecards, too many dashboards, too many personas and scenarios, and then certification that ultimately are not connected to the outcome you're trying to achieve, and they're just creating like loads of activity for the reps themselves as well, but then not really translated into outcomes because you lost track of those in the midst of everything. So even in a mature environment, you want to keep asking which inspectable outputs and associated behaviors predict better pipeline quality and better deal progression. You should also adapt based on your sale motion. If you sell lower ACV or more transactional deals, simplify the model. Just focus on call structure, making sure that there are some clarity around maybe qualification criteria, and just making sure that there is always a next step. You don't need to cover things like multi-threading, trying to get executive alignment early, or doing discovery in a deeper way to be able to build a bigger business case. If you're selling more complex or enterprise deals, you want to expand the model. Discovery may need to cover several meetings, multiple persona stakeholders, the decision criteria for your solution, business impact, creating a shared mutual action plan, and aligning with the different executives. So in that environment, discovery is not just one call, and I would think of it more of a discipline across the whole cycle. So that changes the scope of the program and how many levels you might have to develop. Also, another thing to say, if you don't have any AI role play tools, which are very popular nowadays, do not let that stop you. At the end of the day, AI helps with scale, realism, and giving immediate feedback and repetition. It's incredibly useful, especially when reps need to practice specific moments over and over again across different scenarios. But the underlying principle remains that reps need facilitated practice on realistic work tasks paired with feedback. That's the main thing. And you can do that as well with peer role plays, simulation with managers, and other types of similar activities. So finally, if RevOps or sales operation support is limited, I would recommend, as I say in any program really, to measure fewer things but good things. Start with the scorecard averages and monitor that over a period of time, the documented next steps, the quantified pain that has been captured as well, and maybe look at specifically discovery to opportunity conversion or any other types of conversion that comes off the back of the main discovery activities. It's better to measure a few things consistently than design a reporting model that nobody maintains, nobody reviews, and nobody trusts. Now, let's talk about 1 second. If you were to walk out of this video, like, what is the first immediate step you could take? The first immediate step you could take is to run a 45 minutes discovery behavior alignment session. You want to agree on the first behavioral standards around discovery. You invite one sales leader, maybe 2 frontline managers, and someone from RevOps, or any other team member that you would consider relevant. You want to keep the session very practical, starting by asking, where is discovery not working today? Where it could be better? You might hear different things. Maybe reps pitch too early, the pain stays vague, the pain is not linked to a quantified business impact, most reps don't really commit to a next step at the end of a call, or maybe discovery notes at the end, we can see that they don't have the depth and they are too thin. So therefore, we can't build on them for business cases or other follow-up activities. Then you want to ask which 1 or 2 behaviors will create the biggest improvement in that specific activity or moment. For example, ask better probing question before presenting and confirm quantified pain and success criteria before moving the deal forward. Then define what good looks like. A simple version could be, by the end of discovery, the rep can clearly summarize the bias, current challenge, business impact that challenge may be having, any success criteria worth noting, potential key stakeholders that might be involved, and agreed next steps. Then define an actual small pilot you can run. Something like managers will review 1 discovery call per rep per week for 4 weeks using a shared scorecard. Everyone will provide a 1-page call structure and a question bank. RevOps will provide a baseline on discovery to opportunity conversion and opportunities with documented next steps, which they can pull out from the CRM activities. After the meeting, send a short follow-up that summarizes everything that has been agreed, and that will create enough momentum and clarity to start creating this operating rhythm around discovery quality. So let me leave you with this main idea. Discovery training only works when it becomes a behavior system, and you design it as such, not just a learning event. You need to define the key outputs that will come off the back of great discovery. So what is the standard of assets and other tangible things that should be produced? Define the few behaviors that are important for those outputs to be created. Give reps a clear structure. Create realistic practice, inspect live codes with the same standard that have been defined, and measure whether the behavior is transferring into better opportunities, into better results, into conversion rates, and other important metrics that you might define. That's how you move discovery from simple individual style and someone is natural at doing good discovery to an actual team capability that you have developed consistently across your reps. So the full sales discovery training guide and supporting assets are again linked in the description below. They go deeper into the full program structure, the return on expectation model, the discovery call framework, the 5 stages of sales mastery, how to potentially leverage AI role plays alongside scorecards and certification, and finally also how to demonstrate the value of what you are actually doing. And thank you for staying with me all the way through this video, and I hope you find it useful. I'll see you in the next one.